Hey friends, I'm Ash.
I'm Elle.
We are Vie Cosplay.
This is Shenanigans Cosplayers Say, and we are finally back for season 5, like 6 months later than we planned to be.
Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na.
Roughly 6 months?
Yeah.
Ish.
Well,
you know.
You know what? You know, stuff happens.
It does. I mean, it does.
Uh-huh.
It does happen.
Yeah,
things do occur.
They do.
That you do not plan for. This is accurate.
I don't even want to say if it can go wrong, it will go wrong, because I don't necessarily know that it's necessarily... I want to refer to it as wrong.
No.
It just is.
It just is. There was just a lot that happened at once.
Yes.
On both ends.
They say things happen in threes, but really they happen in like 50s.
Well, because it's one of those where we've obviously had situations where like I have to take the majority of the lead on stuff because you have a lot going on, or you have to take the majority of the lead on something because I have a lot going on. But when we both have a lot going on, it falls apart.
I know.
Which is what we learned in the last 6 months, is when we both have too much going on, it's just not sustainable.
It's hard to powers combined when neither of us has any powers at the time.
Exactly. Like, there's just not the spoons. And because I do a lot more of the producing and whatnot for this show, when I was hit with major life stuff, it wasn't doable anymore.
And that is okay.
Yes. Just like with your costumes and whatnot, if you have to stop, you have to stop. Like, we didn't want to be putting out, half-done things to be able to keep going, and I just couldn't. I didn't have the time or the availability to do that in these last 6 months. So
we missed you.
We did.
Yeah, we missed you also. So we're glad that you're here with us now. And hello, new friends.
Yes.
For those of you who are joining us on season 5 of a Shenanigans Cosplayer Site.
You may be joining us after Colossal Con East, or which would have been like the weekend prior to this airing. So welcome. Some of you may be returning to us now that you realize we are back, and if not been misplaced, because I even stopped doing like bonus stuff back in July. So,
Let's be honest. You weren't misplaced. You were in our hearts the entire time.
Right. It's been a wild ride, 2024. Yeah. So
I see those memes pop up every once in a while, or the continued conversation posts on social media where everybody talks about what a junk year 2019 was, and then they get almost impressed at how much worse each subsequent year gets.
Yes. I mean, I wouldn't say that this year is worse. It's just a lot of change and difference.
It's a lot of change
in a short span of time. So
it's not necessarily bad. It just is.
Right. So we didn't just abandon you because we felt like it. I went through a major life change in the past 6 months. I got divorced. So that is ultimately why the show stopped, was I did not have time to deal with the show when I was dealing with that process. And I am very fortunate that I did not have to go through a difficult process because it was mutually agreed upon. But it is still a process, because I also had to move, and I am now 40 years old because as of yesterday I turned 40, and living with my parents, because what else can you do? So I had to move, and I'm going to tell you all right now, don't change your name. Don't do it. Because changing it back is 10 times worse than trying to change it to start with. So I had to deal with that process and trying to get that all situated. So I had to give up all my cosplay plans for this year and most of next year. Because now, for the first time in an extremely long time, I am on a solo income. So that is going to make a huge impact in what we're able to do, what I am specifically able to do and afford, because most of my money is now going to go to bills. Because everything costs way more than it did 3 years ago. But wages have not increased. So it is going to impact what we're going to be doing and how we're going to balance that out. But we will talk about that a little bit later. So honestly, for me, I don't really know what's going to happen or what we're going to do at this point because everything is so drastically different. But I don't foresee us doing any particularly expensive conventions next year that aren't being paid for by a guesting contract.
That's fair.
But you also had a bunch of changes, which also made it so that you couldn't pick up my work so we could keep going.
Yeah. And I probably talked about this a little bit last year too, towards the end of the season. So I had been begged, I don't know the appropriate term. I had a lot of people that wanted me to take a job that came open at my place of employment. And so I went into it, ended up working a ton of overtime. I actually really liked the job, but I do not like my particular workplace's culture surrounding this position. So while I would 100% do that particular type of work, literally anywhere else, I am lucky enough that there's a grace period where you can choose to go back to your previous job. And I did choose to do that. But that ate up a ton of time. It caused a ton of stress. My husband has made lots of comments about how much I was bringing work home with me. So the burnout was extra real on that. But then we had our sitter had some major health issues, and I actually ended up just putting my entire job on timeout, which I am fortunate that I've been able to do that. However, that's really expensive. So while I have had what I refer to fondly as my summer break with my family, being on leave is expensive. The U.S. healthcare system is ridiculously expensive.
Trash? You mean trash? Because it's trash?
I do mean trash.
Because I'm also like in that boat now too.
Yeah, so the U.S. healthcare system is trash. We looked into going on my husband's insurance for myself and our executive producer, but for reasons with their new contract, that is just not a possibility at this time. His insurance isn't really great either. So it's actually costing me a significant amount of money to be off of work right now. So for the foreseeable future, due to budget, I'm probably going to start looking into maybe more stash projects. I've also been trying to purge a lot of things out of my house, and I'm finally getting to that point where I'm looking at my crafting and cosplay supplies, and there's a lot of it. So there's some costumes that are probably going to be taken apart and their fabrics repurposed into other areas. A lot of things that I purchased for previous costumes that are going to get added to new costumes, even if I hadn't really planned on it, just because it's available. So they might get modded or painted or whatever. But just something a little more casual. Probably nothing super serious as far as contests go or anything like that. It's expensive.
I mean, that's the same boat I'm in too, is I'm gonna have to work with what I already have materials for, because I don't really have the budget to be purchasing a bunch of new materials.
I have a bunch of stuff for Asakizo that I had considered making at one point in time, but I don't know if I have the budget for the embellishments that would go with it, even though I definitely have all the fabrics. And I have lots of stuff for like a fan art piece that I will totally make at some point, but
Well, yeah, it's like I literally have everything for Hinoto, so it's probably time to put her together because I literally have everything for that costume. So
yeah. Also, the lack of routine has been absolutely terrible for my ADHD. Like, it's a struggle all the time. So even trying to like find routine, because then my husband had almost like a month of vacation in the middle of all this. So any routine that I had kind of established was completely out the window.
Right.
And slowly trying to look towards that. So maybe going back to work soon, possibly. That's kind of my tentative game plan. It would not have been yet by the time that this airs, but we'll kind of see what happens in the next couple of weeks as far as me selecting a date. But shortly after I get back, I'm kind of at one of those like milestone points in my career where if I stay where I'm at, it's going to have long-term implications towards both my career goals and my retirement, versus if I were to change or do something else. Or, you know, we've always talked about moving the entire time we've been together. So like that would be another potential thing, because even though I'm limited to geographically within a couple 100 miles of where I currently am, if I want to stay with my current employer, my husband has the ability to move pretty much anywhere south and west from where we are right now. So that topic of conversation comes up every couple years. And obviously, as we're getting closer to some of these deadlines, it's been coming up more frequently. So who knows? Craziness could happen. I could be in a town near you.
I mean, you could be. You never know.
Or like colloquial you, like listenership.
Well,
you.
that's also true, because
who knows?
I also have to make a decision about moving, because obviously I'm not going to live in my parents' house forever. But also we've talked about the fact that I have an hour commute to work, and I am no longer needing to live where I am currently living. So moving is a potential, but that will put us about 2.5 hours plus away from each other. Pretty much anywhere that I would be looking at moving, we'll do that. So then, of course, everybody's next question is, but how will that impact everything else that you guys are doing? Well, in terms of the podcast, it doesn't change anything, because we do, regardless of the fact that we are like an hour apart right now, we do everything remotely anyway.
Yes.
So it doesn't impact the podcast whatsoever. And as far as guesting is concerned, at this point, with what we offer conventions, most of it is already like pre-established. So the only thing that like we run into sometimes is if a convention wants a really specific thing for intermission that isn't what we already have planned, or if we want to do a really specific performance for like our variety show or for an intermission, that's where, you know, it can get a little hairy. But honestly, we have a hard time getting together as it is, being an hour apart. So I don't know that the extra time makes any difference in the grand scheme of things with how we would have to plan.
Yeah.
I mean, it does impact competing more than anything else, but it's been impacting competing. Like, that's going to impact competing unless we ever end up within like 20 minutes of each other. That's always going to impact competing. Because we have to plan way in advance for rehearsals and things of that nature anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't...
Well, for the last several years, we've been practicing in your garage or on your back patio, but like, I don't have anywhere flat.
No.
Like, my yard is on a hill. So.
No, and I'm likely to live in an apartment, so we would be looking for like studio space to rent when we want to rehearse and whatnot anyway, so...
Gymnasiums.
Something. Yeah. I mean...
Yeah.
You know, where my current place of work is in a much better metropolitan area than I am currently, so there might actually be studio space you can rent. I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, it's not gonna change that much of those things. Yeah. That's for the last couple of years, that's just been difficult, period.
I think that in general, though, I think it'll almost be better because we have to be more purposeful with it.
Right.
So
we
do have to plan and schedule and all of those things in advance. And we know that going into it. So it's not like we'll get to it. It's no, this is when we're going to do this thing.
Yeah, we are going to have to be more intentional with deadlines and with scheduling things, which we were going to try to do anyway. So I don't know that that's not really what's going to impact what we're doing. Our budgets, either us having PTO situations, like those kind of things are what's ultimately going to impact.
Yeah.
Like what we're able to do, because as a dual income, I had a lot more freedom with my money than I'm going to have now.
Expendable.
Because where my job is not a cheap place to live. So it's just not, you know, that's going to impact.
Out of curiosity, for any of those of you who do currently do big projects with people that don't live close to you, what are your go-tos?
Yeah, let us know. Also, if you
have tips and tricks,
if you have recommendations for small crafting spaces, although frankly my previous space was so insanely small that I'm not sure I'm going to be much worse off than I already was. So because I was crafting in an 8x10 room. So
I used to have one of those.
So I don't feel like I'm going to be worse off than I already was.
Yeah.
Except that everything will be on one floor and I'm not dragging things from upstairs to downstairs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, that's the adventure. Of how that all works. But honestly, like, as far as guesting was concerned, we were planning on scaling way back anyway. It's just a lot. And I just have too many other things going on now that we were going to kind of take a step back from smaller shows and kind of just focus on a couple big ones a year.
Yeah. And we had done that to a certain extent because those of you that have been with us for a while will remember when we talk about that year that we worked like 15 cons. And we're like, we're never doing that again.
Well, and it's one of those where it's like, sure, this is local and it's not a big deal, but it does start to add up after a while. And we would honestly like to spend some time with each other, not at a freaking convention.
Yes, please.
That would be great. But because we both have such limited, well, I don't have as much limit. You have a lot of limited time. So
I have a lot of limited time. And, you know, with our executive producer going into like formal preschool and all of that kind of stuff, like, yeah, a local con is great, but if I have to take off work, you know, on Friday or Thursday and have to make arrangements for pickups and drop-offs and, you know, all that kind of stuff, it gets to be a lot. And
we've gotten to the point where we only see each other at con.
And I don't like that.
No, that's not like,
I see you at con or on the computer.
Right. And that's just
or
not
on the phone.
Right. That's just not what we want to do. Like, I mean,
friendship is magic.
Not that, you know, well, at this point it'd be a few weekends ago, but I mean, like, Ash and the executive producer came to my house and we just hung out for a while, and that was nice. And we hadn't done that.
It was nice
in literally years. And
it's been a long time.
We need to start prioritizing some of that time and not necessarily spending it at conventions. So we are also, at the flip side, going to be looking at doing cons for fun with our friends and not prioritizing guesting. Because PTO is PTO, and as I've talked about before, PTO is trash in the United States in general. Some people get really good PTO, but most people do not.
Most people do not.
And I want, after going to KitsuneCon, which I will be doing an entire episode with Laughing Red on that, I really want to prioritize more time with my friends. That was a really nice experience, and it was really nice to go to a con and like hang out with people and not have responsibilities, and I would like to do that more frequently, which means less guesting because I can't spend all my PTO on guesting if I want to go to events for fun. So there will probably only be like 1, 2, maybe 3 guesting at the most spots in a year, because we would like to do other things with our time. And we have a pretty good, you know, reoccurring option right now for guesting, so I'm also not going to be necessarily seeking it out anymore either. As you probably remember from the Great Guesting Experiment, that was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress. It was not worth it. And we have found that really, we're not going to book anything unless we have an internal connection anyway. So there is no point in me hunting these conventions down. And we also have, you know, we are very fortunate to have a very nice reoccurring gig with Colossal Con. So I no longer really feel the need to be like reaching out to additional places with time being as limited as it is. It's one of those where it's like, this is predictable. We know exactly how it's going to work. It has worked well multiple times thus far. we have a great working relationship with this convention chain, you know. Doesn't mean that we're not willing to work with other conventions. It's just we're going to be a lot more selective.
I mean, I think it's like any job that you have when you're working as like an independent contractor. Like if you have something where you have a good working relationship with somebody, you're going to prioritize your working relationship with them over, you know, new relationships. And you're going to kind of like look at that as a standard. Like if these people are willing to treat me like as a person the way that they are, then I shouldn't necessarily have to put up with being treated less than by someone else.
We have a very nice gig with Colossal Con. They literally let us do whatever we want because what we want to do is what they want. It's just a happy marriage of need. Like, they want what we're bringing. It turns out to be what we ultimately want to do. So it all works out in the end. So really us picking up anything else is really just going to be based on, like, is it something we really want to do? Do we have the time off for it? And how does that impact us doing things with our friends instead? Because that's also what I'm going to be looking at too, is like, well, if we take this gig, does that mean I have to cancel this thing with our friends then? Because at this point where I'm at, I don't know that I want to cancel the thing with my friends to do the gig.
Then I just have to talk you out of working the entire time that you're at the thing with the friends.
I did good at KitsuneCon. I did one panel.
Excellent. I'm proud of you.
And it went over so well that it continued for half an hour in the hallway.
Those are my favorite.
So we did our Con Crunch panel, and it has a lot about like neurodiversity in it. And so people have lots of additional questions going, oh my gosh, I think I'm neurodiverse. I need to ask you more questions. You know, but I like having the opportunity to do like those panels every once in a while. You know, I don't mind doing those at a con here. I'm totally okay with not doing our 18 plus comedy show 5 to 6 times a year. So that's fine. You know, I don't need to do that 5 to 6 times a year. Like, that's okay.
What?
So it is just going to kind of depend on like what's going on, what we need our time for, what a convention's willing to give us. But I'll be perfectly honest, the bar is set pretty high. So it's like, we already have this that we know works. So
yeah.
Yes. So it's just not going to be a priority. Like, guesting's just not something I want to prioritize as I'm figuring out my life.
Yeah.
And what that's
we've
going
said
to look
multiple
like.
times, like, this is not our full-time job by any means.
No, and it's never going
so
to be our full-time jobs. Like, that's
not the goal.
That's not it. You know, that's definitely not the plan. So yes, competing, because I know prior to the giant break, we were planning on doing more projects again, maybe in a little bit more casual sense. But now we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I will say it was nice just like throwing something at KitsuneCon, and it was nice and low stress. But I don't know. Like, I really don't know what's going to happen. Definitely nothing big. No internationals, no Crown. Crown is also during Costume Con, so we're going to Costume Con, so that's just not going to happen. Laughing and Rat and I are planning on competing together at Costume Con, so that'll be fun and very silly. But outside of that, I don't know. I'm throwing Magic around as an option because they, as of right now, don't have any requirements on a Friday. So you can, like, show up on Saturday and compete. So I'm considering going to Magic if I have something. But yeah, it's just kind of like up in the air. Well, and it's also one of those hard ones where it's like, if you're going to fly somewhere and you're going to spend all this time and money on a costume set, you almost feel obligated to do an international first. Because it's like, you have to work that hard anyway.
Yeah, depending on what the what the set is that you're making. I could
Right.
definitely see that.
And because we're not near anything, everything is a
Yes.
trek anyway. It's like,
Yeah,
well,
it
at
doesn't
that
matter
point,
if I have to fly to Detroit or Seattle or Los Angeles or Orlando
Right.
or
like, do you just go to the international then? So that's kind of what we'll have to figure out as we go. But we're not really trying to promise anything because we have no idea how the next year's going to look.
Yeah, we're not prioritizing anything in particular.
No, we're not.
So,
like, I would like to show up at more contests, but that's easier said than done when you live where we live. So it's not like our Chicago friends or our Milwaukee friends that can just like hop over and go home. Like, we're 3 hours from everything. Makes it a little bit harder to, pop in and do certain things, but guess we'll let you know when we know.
When we know, we'll let you know.
Which, it's funny because, of course, all of the episode requests that we've gotten has been for cosplay competitions, and I'm really starting to feel funny about doing these episodes because we don't actually compete that much. I talk about this a little bit in the Kitsune episode, but I had a lot of people asking if I was judging at Kitsune, and I'm like, no, I'm competing, and they looked very, very confused by this like entire concept. And I had to look back and went, wow, we don't compete locally.
Not
like,
really,
ever. And granted, well, Kitsune-con was 5.5 hours away, but it's quote unquote locally because we are frequently in the Illinois and Wisconsin. Like,
it's in our little community hub that we hang out in whenever we go to cons.
But
so,
I looked back and went, no, we don't. And that is because we used to have so many problems with competing locally. People used to complain so much that we stopped. We let people stop us from competing because they were being poor losers. And we stopped competing locally because people were complaining about it. And then I was like, oh yeah, we don't. Because, I mean, literally, like, we were on a hold forever hoarding our PTO for ICL. Like, that we didn't go to anything.
Yeah.
Like, we went to, like, St. Louis in there. Like, we didn't go to anything because... And then we had to hoard all our time to go to SakuraCon. And then, I did Crown, which is local. And then I did Kitsune. But Crown is Crown. So, it's like, yeah, no, we don't. We don't compete locally. Like, ever. So that was kind of one of those things where I'm like, aha, now I feel a little weird doing some of these episodes about competing because it has changed so much.
Sure.
From when we were doing it regularly, but I also look back and we didn't really do it that frequently anyway. It was like a once a year thing because we would work on one project for an entire year.
We would work on one project, and then once we started judging, we were judging constantly. So We've been running and judging and doing, like, I did, let's see, so your first contest was what, 01, mine was 02, and then I think I ran my first contest in 04. Like, it's a lot. So, like,
yeah,
there's a lot of years of experience, but yeah, it has changed quite a bit in the past several years.
So we would like to do some episodes about, like, how that has drastically changed, and what it means to be, like, novice, journeyman, and masters now, as opposed to what it looked like pre-2020, because everything has drastically changed.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's valid.
like I've mentioned before, I have costumes that I got materials for and started in, like, 2020, 2021 that I look at now going, you probably wouldn't win anything, but you would have pre-2020. Because it doesn't have enough advanced techniques. It doesn't have enough, like, complicated patterning. It doesn't have enough of, like, all these big expectations now that are out there. Because the new kids get to start at such a high level because of all the things that are available.
So many resources. You guys have no idea how lucky you are.
And so
you're jumping in now.
us, our old AF cosplayers who
dinosaurs
are struggling with having to learn all these new techniques are stuck in masters. Now we have to learn new things. So it's very like it's very like I don't know, kind of a surreal, like, just hard to wrap your head around going, okay, well, I'm in masters, but, like, I don't know how to do all these really complicated things now that you have to do for masters. but I still have to enter in Masters, even though this thing is brand new to me.
Well, and that's always been one of those things with different media anyway. You could have somebody that's been, sewing for 20 years that got up to Masters because of their sewing ability, and they might make their very first armor costume completely out of EVA foam, but they're still required to enter in Masters because that's what the requirements are.
Right.
I mean, it's always kind of been like that once they started introducing divisions.
It's just a hard mental switch that has to occur where it's like, yes, you have to enter in Masters, but there's a good chance that product you're entering is closer to Journeyman because it's new to you. So that's, it's just going to take a bit to get used to that, but I do think it would be good to talk about like what the divisions look like now, because people are coming in at such a different level. And I know we've had so many requests to look at the lack of etiquette around cosplay contests, both from audience and contestants.
It's changed a lot.
So much.
It's changed a lot, yeah.
So much cheating. We need to do a follow-up on the cheating episode because that has also changed drastically in this process. But we also feel like from what we've seen, we need to go into what actually goes into running a cosplay contest and who is responsible for what. Because we are seeing online that so much is getting blamed on the judges and the hosts that they do not have any control over. And then the runners only have so much control over things. We know with SakuraCon, it wasn't the contest runners' fault that the contest was at 9 a.m. Like, they didn't really have a way to control that. So I do think that it would probably be helpful if we kind of reviewed what roles cover what, so that maybe people would have a little bit more sympathy for these contests before outright canceling them. Or canceling judges or what have you, because, like, I'll be honest, the judges, and in particular the hosts, have little to no control over the show. Like, none. So, but people seem to think that they're the people that run the show. And
well, it's because they're the people that you see.
They are the people you see. No, they have no power. So, like, that's just kind of something that I think we should probably go over. We may or may not have some experienced contest runners on for an episode as well, just to kind of talk about their end of things. Because there's just a lot that goes into running these contests that people don't think about. And unfortunately, the people who decide to run these contests that don't know what they're doing are probably never going to listen to that episode. But it would be particularly great for them to do so. Because I've also seen a lot of contests being run really haphazardly because they are being run by people that have no clue about contests. These, particularly at Comic-Cons, are just kind of like throwing these people in and going, here, run a contest.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those things where if you've never been in a contest in any fashion, like, that's got to be a rough learning curve. Because
absolutely,
cosplay conventions are just so different from anything else.
Yes. And I mean, all of season 5 will not be just about contests. We have other plans as well. You can always submit episode ideas through our link tree, through our bio on Instagram. If there's things and topics you want us to talk about. We just find that in most cases, the contest episodes are what you all want. So we will bring them as best as we can.
So if there is something you want us to talk about that's not contest related, let us know, because the reason why we're talking about contests is because listeners are asking for it.
Yes, that is. And they are also the highest downloaded episodes that we have are ones on contests. So our con plans for the rest of 2024 into 2025. Well, we just got back from Colossal Con East. We will be returning to Colossal Con North. We are going to Costume Con, which is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So if you're not familiar with that convention, it moves around the United States. So each year it's in a different place. And this year it's going to be in Milwaukee. I personally have always wanted to go. Unfortunately, it is the same weekend as C2E2. So we will not be doing C2E2 in 2025. Because they are the same weekend. But I honestly don't know that I feel like I need to do C2E2 every year anymore anyway.
Yeah.
We've done it every year since 2020, except we skipped it 1 year for SakurCon, but I could see it being an every other year deal. At this point now, they have so much evening programming that our comedy show doesn't even get the amount of attendees that it used to. They keep putting us in a smaller room every year. And so I just don't know that it's, worth it necessarily.
Well, there's other things, I would have gone to prom if we didn't have our show.
I would have gone to prom. Technically we had badges for Sheeprop, so it might be one of those where maybe next time we don't even bother submitting the comedy show, we just do Sheeprop panels. Part of me doesn't, if I go back, I kind of want to do Crown again, so I want to have a Crown costume. Ultimately, it's the same weekend as Costume Con, and Costume Con is a one-time thing, so I'm going to go do that. C2 is expensive, and Costume Con is cheap. So the hotel room is drastically less expensive for Costume Con. And they're the exact same distance away, so, and I don't have to pay $114 in parking and eat a $16 burger at Costume Con, so I think we're gonna do that instead. I mean, the only downside is, there's people we only see at C2E2, so, that's unfortunate. But yeah, outside of that, there's really no concrete plans because we don't know what we're doing. We can't plan super far in advance anymore. So, as far as 2025 goes, I have no idea because it's too far in advance.
But we're taking recommendations. So,
yes.
If you have any recommendations for us, we'll make costumes and travel. So.
Yes.
I would say have costume, we'll travel, but that would be a lie.
I mean, in general, our plan is to do exactly that, though, is we will have costume first. That's kind of the new plan, essentially, is to make sure that we have the costumes before we sign up, which, unfortunately, some of these conventions open their sign-ups so absurdly early that we may have to pass on certain conventions because they open their signups 6 months in advance. Milwaukee. So, and since it's first come, first serve, I can't prove that I have a costume done. So, if it's a convention that opens their signups extraordinarily early, we probably won't be able to do it. Unless it's one of those where the costume's been done for a year and now we can sign up. Because I personally don't want to be signing up anymore unless there's a costume. It's gotten us into too many crunching situations.
Well, and even just watching some of our friends con crunch this year has given me massive anxiety. And I was like, oh, no, stop it. And I'm not even going to be at the event. I'm just watching it on my social media feed and I feel for you so much.
Yeah, I'm I don't, no.
I don't need that kind of negativity.
No,
in my life.
I think we're better off just being done before we go.
Well, and talking about PTO, I know the last several contests that we've done, I've always ended up taking off PTO before the con to just finish crunching costumes.
Right.
So if the costumes already exist, then
we don't have to worry about it. Yeah. So we're just not going to sign up anymore until there's costumes. Period. The end. I mean,
and now that we're willing, to travel further, that also just gives us more variety of options, though, as far as where we're going. So we can say, hey, you know what? We have a long weekend this weekend, or this would be a great time to go to a con. What's out there then?
Right. Because we've had some cons that are further away, NDK and whatnot, that Otakon that we've looked at before, Boston, but we definitely would. Those you sign up for close to, and I still haven't figured out why NDK isn't juried, but it literally fills immediately. So, those are typically very close to, so I would want to make sure the costume is completely done before signing up for some of those. We'll show up somewhere, but you have no idea where it's going to be because we don't know what's going on. That's all the plans we have right now. We know for sure we'll see y'all in Milwaukee at Costume Con, and at North. So Wisconsin, because it was the Grand Wisconsin Tour this year, because I did Milwaukee, Kitsune Con, ShizuCon, and North. So all of the Wisconsin for this year. So we will be back in a couple of weeks with the very long-awaited Crown Championships of Cosplay episode, which I know you all have been waiting patiently for us to release, so I can talk about our experience at Crown and what goes into Crown and what you can expect if you decide to do Crown. Pigeons is what you can expect. Pigeons. Lots of them. Forever. Pigeons. Just pigeons. Well, I think that's all we have for this episode, so...
All right, friends. We will see you back in a couple of weeks for your regularly scheduled programming. Bye.
Bye.
I'm Ash.
I'm Elle.
And we are Vie Cosplay.
And this is Shenanigans Cosplayers Say. You've been listening to Shenanigans Cosplayers Say, produced by LVC Productions. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube at Vie Cosplay. Our podcast Instagram is podcast SCS. Our website is laviecosplay.com. Have a fun, crazy con or cosplay related story, absurd cosplay question, or just something in general to share with us? Email us at podcastscs@gmail.com or DM us at podcastscs or Vie Cosplay on Instagram. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening, and remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should.